Welcome once again to History's Finest Tops. In this video, we will unravel the mysteries surrounding 8 individuals who defied the entire world, managing to escape the reach of law and justice for a long time. Do not miss it. Number 8. Rafael Caro Quintero, born on October 3, 1952 in La Noria, Badiraguato, Mexico, is known as a controversial figure in the underworld. His rise and fall are intertwined with a series of tumultuous events that marked his life and his black legacy in Mexican history. Caro Quintero began his career in the 1970s, trafficking illicit substances in the state of Sinaloa. He soon joined a group of larger and more powerful traffickers, including Miguel Ángel Felix Gallardo and Ernesto Fonseca Carrillo, to form what would become the Guadalajara cartel. Under his leadership, the cartel became one of the most notorious criminal groups in Mexico, controlling much of the trafficking of illicit substances in the country and into the United States. One of Caro Quintero's most serious acts was the detention and disappearance of American DEA agent Enrique "Kiki" Camarena in 1985. Camarina's disappearance sparked a massive response from U.S. and Mexican authorities, who placed a reward of $5 million for his head, which led to the capture of Caro Quintero in Costa Rica that same year. After his capture, Caro Quintero was extradited to Mexico, where he was tried and convicted for Camarina's disappearance. However, his conviction was overturned in 2013 due to a procedural error, sparking outrage in both the United States and Mexico. On Friday, July 15, 2022, Caro Quintero was recaptured at the age of 69 in the municipality of Xoy, Sinaloa. The Attorney General's office reported that he was admitted to the Federal Center for Social Rehabilitation, Altiplano, in Almoloya de Juarez, State of Mexico. Caro Quintero continues to be remembered in the underworld. Their story, filled with violence and betrayal, is a grim reminder of the dangers of organized crime in Mexico and around the world. Number 7. Doroteo Arango Arambula, known as Francisco Pancho Villa, was born on June 5, 1878 in San Juan del Rio, Durango, Mexico. Villa was one of the most prominent revolutionary leaders during the Mexican Revolution at the beginning of the 20th century. Villa grew up in poverty and began working as a laborer on a ranch at a young age. His life changed when he killed the owner of the ranch in an act of revenge for raping his sister. To avoid being captured, he joined a band of bandits and adopted the name Pancho Villa. As the Mexican Revolution gained strength, Villa joined the revolutionary forces and became a charismatic and courageous leader. He organized and led the Northern Division, an army of peasants and workers who fought against the government of President Porfirio Diaz and then against the government of Victoriano Huerta. Villa's exploits in the war were legendary. His guerrilla strategy allowed him to defeat much larger and better equipped forces in several major battles. One of his most famous victories was the Battle of Zacatecas in 1914, where he defeated Huerta's army and helped end his rule. After Huerta's fall, Villa became an important figure in Mexican politics and the struggle for power. However, his relationship with other revolutionary leaders, such as Venustiano Carranza, became increasingly strained. In 1920, Villa retired from political life and devoted himself to business and charitable activities on his ranch in Chihuahua. Pancho Villa's fall was as dramatic as his rise. In 1923, while driving through the streets of Peril, Chihuahua, he was ambushed and murdered by a group of armed men. His death put an end to the life of one of the most charismatic and controversial revolutionary leaders in Mexico, leaving a legacy that still endures in the memory of the Mexican people. Number 6. John Dillinger, America's famous public enemy number 1 during the Great Depression, was born on June 22, 1903 in Indianapolis. From a young age, Dillinger showed criminal inclinations and became involved in robberies and other petty crimes. His criminal career took off in the 1930s when he joined a gang of thieves and robbers. John Dillinger's rise to power as a prominent robber began in the 1930s, when he joined John "Red" Hamilton's gang of robbers. Together, they carried out a series of daring bank robberies and escaped from the police on numerous occasions, earning a reputation as skilled and elusive criminals. Dillinger's criminal career peaked in 1933, when he was arrested in Arizona and extradited to Indiana, where he managed to escape from prison using a carved wooden gun. From then on, he became one of the most wanted criminals in the United States, leading a gang that carried out a series of bank robberies and murders across the country. John Dillinger's downfall came on July 22, 1934, when he was ambushed by FBI agents and Chicago police outside the Biograph Theater in Chicago. In a shootout, Dillinger was shot dead and died instantly, ending the life of the most famous thief of the time. Despite his life of crime and violence, John Dillinger was seen by some as a folk hero during the Great Depression, a sort of modern-day Robin Hood who defied authorities and stole from the rich to give to the poor. However, his death marked the end of an era of famous thieves and criminals in the United States, leaving a legacy of violence and crime that would live on in the collective memory. Number 5. Billy the Kid, whose real name was William Henry McCarty Jr., was born on November 23, 1859 in New York or Indiana, as his exact birthplace remains a matter of debate. At a young age, his father died and he moved with his mother to New Mexico, where his life took a course that would make him a legend of the Old West. As he grew older, Billy the Kid became involved in criminal activity, stealing livestock and engaging in other petty criminal acts. However, his criminal career took off in the 1870s when he joined a group of outlaws known as the Regulators, who fought rival factions in the so-called Lincoln County War. During this time, he gained a reputation as a skilled and fearless gunfighter. Billy the Kid's rise to power was marked by a series of violent confrontations and daring escapes. In 1877, he was arrested for the first time for leading the gang, the Regulators, in their cattle thefts, but he managed to escape from prison and became a fugitive. In the following years, he participated in several confrontations and shootouts, earning an undisputed reputation as the most feared and respected bandit in the West. The end of Billy the Kid came in 1881, when he was captured by Sheriff Pat Garrett at Fort Sumner, New Mexico. After a quick and controversial trial, he was sentenced to death for the murder of a deputy sheriff during one of his previous escapes. On July 14, 1881, Billy the Kid was executed by Pat Garrett in Lincoln Jail, ending the life of one of the most famous gunslingers of the Old West. Although his life was short and his criminal career lasted only a few years, Billy the Kid became a Western legend, immortalized in books, movies and songs as a symbol of the frontier era and the legend of the lone gunfighter. His life and death continue to fascinate people to this day, making him one of the most iconic characters in American history. Number 4. Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, a much-discussed figure in the underworld, was born on April 4, 1957 in La Tuna, Sinaloa, Mexico. Coming from a humble family, Guzman soon entered the dark world of illicit substance trafficking. His rise was meteoric. He began working for Miguel Ángel Félix Gallardo, a renowned Mexican boss, and quickly proved to be a cunning and ruthless leader. He eventually became one of the most powerful leaders of the Sinaloa cartel, an empire known for its ferocity and ability to evade authorities. El Chapo was known for his ability to build secret tunnels that he used to transport large quantities of illicit substances across the border between Mexico and the United States. He was also famous for his ability to make deals with high-level officials and stay one step ahead of the authorities at all times. Throughout his career, El Chapo accumulated an enormous fortune, becoming considered one of the richest men in the world. However, his empire also caused a great deal of violence in Mexico and other countries. El Chapo's downfall began in 1993, when he was captured in Guatemala and extradited to Mexico. Despite being imprisoned, Guzman continued to run his businesses from prison and managed to escape on 2 occasions, one of them through a tunnel built under his cell, so, from that moment, he became one of the most dangerous and wanted men. The government of Mexico, through the Attorney General's office, offered a reward of 60 million pesos, and the U.S. government $5 million, to anyone who provided valuable information for the location and detention of Joaquin Guzman Lora. Finally, in 2016, El Chapo was recaptured in Mexico and later extradited to the United States, where he was tried and convicted on charges related to trafficking of illicit substances and organized crime. In 2019, he was sentenced to life in prison, plus 30 years in prison, ending the criminal career of one of the most famous and feared bosses in history. Number 3. Pablo Emilio Escobar Gaviria was a boss of the Colombian underworld who became one of the richest criminals in the world. Born on December 1, 1949 in Rio Negro, Colombia, Escobar grew up poor in Medellin and became involved in criminal activities from a young age. In the 1970s, Escobar began working as a criminal and distributor of illicit substances. Over time, he built an illicit substance trafficking empire known as the Medellin Cartel, which became one of the most violent in the world. Escobar was responsible for sending tons of illicit substances to the United States and other countries, thus managing to consolidate his empire, making him the most respected man in his environment, accumulating an immense fortune, which was around $25 billion between goods and cash. Thus establishing him as one of the richest men in the world according to Forbes magazine for 7 consecutive years. Escobar's rise to power was marked by violence. He used a combination of bribes, threats and disappearances to maintain his control over the business, and to influence Colombian politics and society. During the 1980s, the Medellin cartel was responsible for a large number of disappearances and acts of violence in Colombia and other countries, which led to a $10 million reward for information leading to his capture. However, Escobar's notoriety eventually led to his downfall. In 1991, he surrendered to Colombian authorities as part of an agreement to avoid extradition to the United States. However, he continued to direct his operations from prison, killing his closest collaborators, and in 1992 he escaped from La Catedral prison, where he was held in luxurious conditions. Escobar's escape generated intense persecution by Colombian authorities, U.S. authorities, illegal groups, and Escobar's former associates, which led to Escobar finally being located on December 2, 1993. Escobar was located due to a call that lasted more than 20 minutes with his son Juan Pablo Escobar, and was murdered by Colombian security forces on the roof of a house in Medellin, thus ending the life of the most wanted man in the world in the 90s. Number 2. Adolf Hitler was born on April 20, 1889 in Braunau am Inn, Austria-Hungary. His father, Alois Hitler, was a customs official, and his mother, Clara Hitler, was a housewife. Hitler had several siblings, but most of them died in childhood, leaving him as the only surviving son. Hitler showed interest in art from a young age and tried unsuccessfully to enter the Academy of Fine Arts in Vienna. In 1913, he moved to Munich, Germany, where he lived a bohemian life and became involved in far-right politics. During World War I, he served in the German army and was awarded the Iron Cross for bravery in combat. After the war, Hitler joined the German Workers' Party, which later became the Nazi Party. His skill as an orator and his nationalist message resonated with many Germans disaffected by the consequences of the war and the Great Depression. In 1923, Hitler attempted a coup known as the Munich Putsch, which failed and resulted in his arrest and prison sentence. During his time in prison, he wrote his famous book, Mein Kampf, My Struggle, in which he outlined his political ideas and vision for Germany. After his release from prison, Hitler reorganized the Nazi Party and used increasingly violent methods to consolidate his power. In 1933, he was appointed Chancellor of Germany by President Paul von Hindenburg. Once in power, Hitler eliminated his political opponents, established a totalitarian regime, and as leader of Germany, began implementing expansionist policies that led to World War II in 1939. During the war, Hitler led Germany in a series of military campaigns that led to the occupation of much of Europe. However, defeats at Stalingrad and Normandy marked the beginning of Germany's decline. The search for Adolf Hitler at the end of World War II was intense and aimed at capturing the Nazi leader to bring him to justice. After Allied forces took control of Berlin in May 1945, Hitler had died in his bunker on April 30th, but his body was not found until days later, outside the bunker. Number 1. Osama bin Laden was a Saudi criminal, founder of the pan-Islamic militant organization Al-Qaeda. The group is designated as a terrorist group by the United Nations Security Council, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO, the European Union and several countries. Bin Laden, as leader of Al-Qaeda, was responsible for the 9/11 attacks in the United States and many other mass casualty attacks around the world. Between August 1988 and late 1989, he founded the network known as Al-Qaeda, which consisted largely of Muslim militants that bin Laden had met in Afghanistan, such as his lieutenant Ayman al-Zawahiri, along with bin Laden himself. The group financed and organized several attacks around the world. After the attacks of September 11, 2001, by order of President George Bush, the so-called war against terrorism began, becoming an international persecution for an entire decade, from 2001 to 2011, initially offering $25 million for his capture, until they finally doubled this offer to $50 million for information leading to the capture of bin Laden. The United States asked Taliban authorities to hand over bin Laden to face terrorism charges. The Taliban refused to hand over bin Laden without evidence or indications of his involvement in the 9/11 attacks, and made a counteroffer for bin Laden to go to an Islamic court or be extradited to another country. Both offers were rejected by the United States government. On May 1, 2011, it was reported that Osama bin Laden was killed during a U.S. military action. Bin Laden's identity was confirmed by comparing preserved samples of his sister's DNA with bin Laden's DNA. The body was taken by elements of the United States Armed Forces after the attack, and remained in their possession. Finally, his body was transferred to the aircraft carrier USS Carl Vinson, where after a funeral was held according to Islamic rites, he was buried in the Arabian Sea. If you liked the video, please like and subscribe to the channel, so we can bring you more of history's finest tops, from around the world.